Welcome back. All right, so news of the day video for all you fine people this afternoon. It's afternoon here, anyways. Evening, nighttime, morning, depends what part of the world you're in. Whenever you watch this, thanks for watching. Rasmus Andersson was fined $5,000 for roughing. So, last night's game, it looked like a headbutt from one angle. From the other angle, it was not. And the question that gets asked, and I saw this on Twitter, and it's a good question: should intent have something to do with whether they fine or suspend somebody? And again, it does seem to be a bit of a slippery slope once you get into the whole, well, what did they intend to do? So Anderson gets a $5,000 fine, which is the maximum, which goes into the Players Emergency Assistance Fund. And so that way, nobody's happy. People who don't think anything should have happened are mad about the fine. People who think something should have happened aren't happy about the fine. And people who think, well, a fine is okay, don't think it's enough money. So, yeah, there you go. It hits all the right notes. Apparently, in the post game, Elliot Friedman had an angle that showed that it was not an actual headbutt, and so yeah, there you go. $5,000 fine. Capo Caco's on the injured reserve, so the New York Rangers have some work to do here. Morgan Barron's been called up. I'm hoping Caco's not out for long. It's too bad because the talent's there, but now with him on injured reserve. The other thing is apparently the team's circling back on Kravtsov. So if you are of the mind that the New York Rangers don't handle their young players particularly well, Elias Anderson comes to mind, then the Kravtsov situation, if they are asking him, look, can you report to the Rangers then because we need you, it doesn't end up looking great either. If Kravtsov is good enough to be the next guy into the lineup, then they should have kept him on the team and they shouldn't have tried demoting him. So, and again, it's easy for us on this side to make that statement, and yet it's one of those things where it's gone from, okay, so we're going to let him talk about trades and we'll send him off, to, okay, wait, no, wait a minute, we might need him back. So we'll see what happens with Kravtsov if he does return to the team and end up playing for the Rangers, or if they try to talk him into reporting to the AHL, which is part of the rumor as well. I have no idea what's going to happen there. So we'll see. The Rangers could be quite the story again this year. They usually are. They're usually very interesting to watch. Speaking of which, Austin Matthews likely to return tomorrow for the Toronto Maple Leafs, wearing a regular jersey at practice. Looks like he's good to go. And Hutchinson's been called up on an emergency basis. So Hutchinson's up. It looks like Mrazek's going to be out 2 weeks with a groin injury. And so Hutchinson's there on an emergency basis. And again, there's the cap discussions to be had, and we'll come back to that. Because Nathan MacKinnon, not traveling with the team, still in COVID protocols, had another positive test. Taves is traveling with the team, doesn't likely play Tuesday in Washington, but could play games after that. Nichushkin may very well not play on the upcoming road trip, but again, he won't play Tuesday. They're just not sure beyond that. So a lot of injury issues adding up for Colorado. Again, it feels like it's every year. The interesting thing, of course, is that both of these teams played with not optimal lineups, right? So we'll come back to that in a bit. No new waivers today. Derek Grant and Greg Pattern have cleared. Now remember, once a player clears waivers, you don't have to waive them again for another 30 days. I'm thinking Grant probably gets traded. I've mentioned Grant lives in Abbotsford. The Canucks have lost players. Wouldn't be surprised to see Derek Grant end up being traded to the Canucks and end up in Abbotsford. Because again, if a team picks him up, let's say Detroit picks him up, they can send him to the AHL right now and no need for waivers. Whereas if you trade for the player and then you have to waive him, well, then Anaheim could just take him back. I used to do that in NHL games. I would trade players to teams knowing that team was going to waive him and then just keep trading him over and over again. And eventually you break the game. So yeah, don't do it because you'll break the game. Also out of last night's game, Nikita Kucherov, him and Jan Ruda both got hurt. There's no clarification yet on what's going on with them, but once they've returned home and been evaluated, the Lightning will let us know. Keep in mind, this is not the same Tampa team they were last year. They've lost a lot of depth going into this year. So I've already seen all the jokes about, oh, see, now Kucherov's going to go on injured reserve. And they're not in a position this year where they have a strong enough lineup to do that. Last year, they had a strong enough lineup to weather through that. This year, they really don't. This is This is a team that really desperately needs Kucherov. And so we'll see what happens with Kucherov and Ruda. So a question that's been asked, and so I'll throw this out there for all you fine people watching as well, is so a team is at the salary cap. This happened to both Colorado and Toronto. In Toronto's case, they had to sign a goaltender out of the University of Toronto for like a one-day type contract to be the backup before they could call up Hutchinson. They could not call up Hutchinson yesterday. For the Colorado Avalanche, they had to play with less than 18, or yeah, what is it? So you have your 12 forward, 6 defensemen, so 20 players. They played with 19. I'm usually I'll say 18 because I forget the goalies. That's terrible if you're a general manager, but there are general managers who've been accused of that as well, forgetting the goaltending. But yeah, so the question becomes one of, and Carlo Kaliakovo put this out on Twitter as well, that it doesn't look good on the league to have teams playing with less than full rosters. It happened to Vegas last year. I think it was 4 times, and I believe they lost 3 out of those 4 games, and you could tell. So what happens is you've got maybe 11 forwards and 6 defensemen, maybe 12 forwards and 5 defensemen, but whatever you do in the game, you're going to have somebody who's going to be double shifted. You're going to have players who are maybe playing a role they aren't used to. It just throws the team off because you're 1 player short. And I believe at one point there was, I want to say it happened to Vegas where they were 2 short. But again, then what happens is you're in the middle of a game, you're already a player down, and then somebody gets hurt, right? So the question becomes one of, should that happen? Should the National Hockey League be in a position where if a team is at the salary cap and you have somebody on the IR, they can't call somebody up because they don't get that extra space they get with long-term injured reserve? Should they be allowed to call somebody up from the AHL? Should Hutchinson just have been allowed to come up yesterday? I don't think there's a problem with that, personally. I think that when you've got a team that isn't its full complement on the ice, I think that what you're playing with there isn't just, punishing them for being at the cap, but you're in a situation now where the risk for injury is probably a little bit higher. And as I said, Vegas lost 3 out of 4. I think it was 3 out of 4 games they played with less than a full complement last year due to the cap. So while it's easy to focus in on Toronto, the team that gets the most attention, they're not the only one this has happened to. And with so many teams right at the salary cap right now, where they do not have wiggle room. And this is why when people were saying, Shannon worries too much about the cap, everybody's going to be under. No, because if you're at the cap, this is what happens. So should there be some kind of a mechanism in the NHL where a team is allowed to call up players? And yeah, maybe you make it so there's certain requirements for the players who are going to be emergency call-ups that don't count towards the cap. Maybe it has to be a guy who's a certain age, has a certain amount of experience, or less than a certain amount of experience. I don't know how you'd play this, but I do think that there should be a conversation with so many teams at the cap or over the cap and having to use LTIR to get under and all this other stuff. It might be the time to have that conversation, because basically to get cap compliant, teams having to play with less than a full roster, I don't like it. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.